The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was a man-made disaster, a true tragedy of its time, made all the worse by the fact that it could have been prevented. Within just 18 minutes, it was all over. 146 lives were lost. New York, early 20th century, a vibrant, ambitious city. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, perched on the top floors of the Asch Building in Manhattan, was a bustling center of industry. It stood as a beacon of opportunity to the hundreds of young immigrant women who passed through its doors, eager to find work and build new lives in America. Yet, the reality of their daily existence within these walls was far from the dream they had chased across oceans and borders. To understand the magnitude of this disaster, we must first look at the world in which these workers lived. Owned by Max Planck and Isaac Harris, the factory was a typical sweatshop, characterized by long hours, low pay, and dangerous working conditions. "We worked every day from 7 in the morning to 8 at night," said one worker, outlining a grueling schedule that left little time for rest or leisure. For their labor, the women earned between $7 and $12 a week, a miserly sum that barely covered the essentials of life in the bustling city. The factory floor was cramped and overcrowded, with rows of sewing machines where the workers, many of them teenagers, spent their days stitching together the fashionable shirtwaists that were in high demand. Their working conditions were tough. Moreover, the safety measures within the factory were woefully insufficient. There were 4 elevators, but only one was reliably in service, forcing the workers to queue in a long, narrow corridor each day. The building boasted 2 stairways to the street below, yet one was habitually locked, an extreme measure intended to prevent theft. The fire escape, such as it was, proved to be a death trap in its own right, too narrow to serve as an effective means of evacuation, and poorly constructed to boot. Despite the obvious risks, Planck and Harris had done little to safeguard their workforce. Actually, shockingly enough, it turned out that the 2 owners had considerable experience and a suspicious history of factory fires. The Triangle factory was twice scorched in 1902, while their Diamond Waste Company factory burned twice, in 1907 and in 1910. It seems that Planck and Harris deliberately torched their workplaces before business hours in order to collect on the large fire insurance policies they purchased, a not uncommon practice in the early 20th century. While this was not the cause of this 1911 fire, it contributed to the tragedy, as Planck and Harris refused to install sprinkler systems and take other safety measures in case they needed to burn down their shops again. Nonetheless, these workers were looking for a better life, but the environment they worked in was fraught with danger. The factory had become very risky, setting the scene for what would become one of the worst disasters of the industrial age. Within just half an hour, 146 lives were gone, but not to fate. Because worst of all, many deaths could have been prevented had the door to the street simply been unlocked. On that fateful Saturday afternoon, March 25, 1911, a day that began like any other. The employees, mostly teenage girls, were eager to finish their shifts. Little did they know that their workplace was a death trap, sealing their fate. As the clock neared the end of another long workday, a small, seemingly inconsequential act set off a chain of events that would lead to one of the deadliest industrial disasters in American history. A cigarette butt, carelessly discarded amidst piles of fabric scraps and tissue paper, smoldered unnoticed until it ignited a blaze. Within moments, the 8th floor of the Asch Building was engulfed in flames. The factory was bustling with activity, with some 600 workers present, including the owners, Isaac Harris and Max Planck. Panic spread as quickly as the fire itself. "It only took a few minutes for the 8th floor to become an inferno," recalled a survivor, her voice still shaking with the memory of the terror that ensued. Workers scrambled towards the exits, only to find their paths blocked by flames or insurmountable obstacles. The single operational elevator became a lifeline for a lucky few. It could hold only 12 people at a time, and after 4 desperate trips, it succumbed to the heat and ceased to function. "We tried to use the fire escape," another worker recounted, "but it was so narrow and frail, and then it just collapsed." This flimsy structure, upon which so many had pinned their hopes, gave way, sending those on it plummeting to their deaths. The stairwells, meant to offer safe passage to the ground, became death traps. One was engulfed in flames, and the other, locked from the outside to prevent theft, trapped workers behind its immovable doors. As the situation inside the building grew increasingly dire, onlookers gathered in the streets below, horror-struck by the scene unfolding before their eyes. Firefighters arrived swiftly, but their ladders reached only as high as the 6th floor, far short of the 8th floor inferno. Desperate for escape, some poor women jumped to their death to avoid being burned alive. A horrifying choice witnessed by the crowd below in stunned silence. "The bodies, they just kept falling," one horrified onlooker remembered, a haunting image that would stay with many for the rest of their lives. Inside, the smoke and flames were relentless. "The heat was unbearable," a survivor recalled. "You couldn't see, you couldn't breathe." For those trapped on the factory floors, the situation was quickly becoming a living nightmare. The air filled with the sounds of coughing, crying, and prayers whispered in dozens of languages. In the midst of the terror, one woman emerged as the epitome of selflessness. Fanny Lanzner from Russia, her name lost to time, but her actions immortalized in history.
She kept guiding them into the elevator as it made numerous trips up and down, and just to think of a 21-year-old knowing she had minutes to live and chose to put others ahead of herself.
By the time the fire department managed to bring the blaze under control, the toll was devastating. 49 workers had perished in the flames or been overcome by smoke. 36 more were found at the bottom of the elevator shafts, their last desperate attempt at escape ending in tragedy. And on the sidewalks below, 58 bodies lay as a grim reminder of the day's horrors, with many more injured. In the aftermath of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, the city of New York was engulfed not just in grief, but in a profound sense of outrage. The tragedy laid bare the stark realities of industrial exploitation and negligence. Shortly after the tragedy, Harris and Blank found themselves facing manslaughter charges, accused of negligence that led to the catastrophic loss of 146 lives on March 25th. During the trial, that lasted over 3 weeks, 150 witnesses testified, painting a harrowing picture of the conditions within the factory and the desperate struggle to escape the flames. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence of negligence, the defendants countered that the conditions at Triangle violated no city or state labor regulations except for the locked exit door, which they claimed to have known nothing about. The jury believed them, and they were acquitted of all charges. This verdict was met with disbelief and anger. How could they not know? Survivors and families of the victims asked, their voices full of betrayal and mourning. However, the tragedy did not fade quietly into history. Instead, it became a driving force behind major changes in labor and workplace safety standards. Frances Perkins, who witnessed the fire and would later become a key figure in the Roosevelt administration, saw the tragedy as a turning point. She was influential in pushing for new laws that would prevent such a disaster from happening again. The aftermath of the fire saw the creation of the Factory Investigating Commission by the New York State Legislature. This commission conducted thorough inspections and hearings, leading to the enactment of over 30 new laws. These laws transformed labor in New York, introducing regulations on fire safety, working hours, and conditions that set a precedent for the entire country. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was a microcosm of the industrial age's darkest tendencies, where the lives of workers were expendable in the relentless pursuit of economic gain. Yet, within its walls, amidst the din of sewing machines and the chatter of young voices, there existed dreams of a better life and a determination to persevere against the odds. It was these dreams that would be so tragically cut short on that fateful day in March 1911. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you want to support the channel.